good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon. I want you to remember something. What I want you to remember is the fact that context is everything. My name is John Michael here at Context is Everything Media Network with another installment of the Ambient Classroom. Now, the Ambient Classroom is not just a series where I read through this textbook cover to cover, all 1,007 pages. It's also a context building mechanism for me. Founder and CEO of Context is Everything Media Network, John Michael Monroy. I'm reading through this textbook to build my context for history. Doesn't that make sense? Ancient Rome and the Rise of Christianity is the next chapter in this textbook. We're on page 126 of 1007, and Ancient Rome and the Rise of Christianity is chapter 6, and section 1 of chapter 6 is the Roman world takes shape. As we could recall, the Hellenistic era ends with the rise of the Roman Empire. That's where we left off. You can watch the review in yesterday's episode if you're interested in hearing more about that. The Roman world takes shape. Setting the scene. Romans loved stories about great heroes of the past. One of their favorite heroes was Horatius, who was said to have single-handedly saved Rome from an invading Etruscan army. Now, I need to just take a second here because I'm misreading left and right, and that's not good. So let me take a second here to plug in the charger to the computer so I stop looking at the screen as often. And let me figure out how to say these two words. One a name and the other a name. Horatius. Horatius is one of the favorite heroes of the Romans, who is said to have single-handedly saved Rome from an invading Etruscan, Etruscan army. Etruscan. I'm going to land on Etruscan and Horatius. As an army approached, Horatius rushed to the far end of the bridge that led into the city. Standing alone, he held off the attackers while his fellow Romans tore down the bridge behind him. As the last timber fell, Horatius flung himself into the river below. Dodging the spears raining down from all around him, he swam safely to the other side. The story of Horatius is more legend than history. Still, it helps us to understand the virtues that the Romans admired. Courage, loyalty, devotion to duty were pillars of the Romans that would build an empire. Geography and peoples of Italy. Rome began as a small city-state in Italy, but ended up ruling the entire Mediterranean world. The story of the Romans and how they built the world empire starts with the land where they lived. Subheading: Geography. The Italian peninsula looks like a boot jutting into the Mediterranean Sea. The peninsula is centrally located in the Mediterranean, and the city of Rome is in the center of Italy. That location helped the Romans as they expanded, first in Italy and then into lands around the Mediterranean. Because of its geography, Italy was much easier to unify than Greece. Unlike Greece, Italy is not broken up into small, isolated valleys. In addition, the Apennine Mountains, which run like a backbone down the length of Italy's peninsula, are less rugged than the mountains of Greece. Finally, Italy has the advantage of broad, fertile plains, both in the north under the shadows of the Alps, and in the west, where the Romans settled. These plains supported a growing population. Subheading: Peoples. The ancestors of the Romans, the Latins, migrated into Italy by about 800 BC. The Latins settled along the Tiber River in small villages scattered over seven low-lying hills, where they herded and farmed. Those villages would in time grow into Rome, the city of seven hills. Romans shared the Italian peninsula with other peoples. Among them were Greek colonists whose city-state dotted southern Italy, and Etruscans who lived north of Rome. For a time, the Etruscans ruled more of central Italy, including Rome itself.
Okay, I found this on the web for who a city-state started southern Italy and Etruscan.
I don't like Siri. That was Siri who just listened to every word I said and transcribed it perfectly, even with my misreading. The Romans shared the Italian peninsula with other peoples. Among them were Greek colonists whose city-states dotted southern Italy, and the Etruscans who lived north of Rome. For a time, the Etruscans ruled much of central Italy, including Rome itself. The Romans learned much from Etruscan civilization. They adapted the alphabet that the Etruscans had earlier acquired from the Greeks. They also learned to use the arch in building and adapted Etruscan engineering techniques to drain the marshy lands along the Tiber. Etruscan gods and goddesses merged with Roman deities. A new heading here. The Roman Republic. The Romans drove out their Etruscan ruler in 509 BC. This date is traditionally considered to mark the founding of the Roman state. The Romans set up a new government in which some officials were chosen by people. They called it a republic, or thing of the people. A republic, Romans thought, would keep any individual from gaining too much power. The government takes shape. In the early republic, the most powerful governing body was the Senate. Its 300 members were all patricians, members of the landholding upper class. Senators, who served for life, made the laws. Each year, the senators elected from the patrician class 2 consuls. Their job was to supervise the business of government and command the armies. Consuls, however, could serve only one term. They were also expected to consult with the Senate. By limiting their time in office and making them responsible to the Senate, Rome had a system of checks on the power of government. In the event of war, the Senate might choose a dictator, or ruler who has complete control over the government. Each Roman dictator was granted power to rule for 6 months. Then he had to give up power. Romans admired Cincinnatus as a model dictator. Cincinnatus organized an army, led the Romans to victory over the attacking enemy, attended victory celebrations, and returned to his farmland, all within 16 days. Plebeians demand equality. This is a subheading. At first, all government officials were patricians. Plebeians, farmers, merchants, artisans, and traders who made up the bulk of the population, had little influence. The effort of the plebeians to gain power shaped politics in the early republic. The plebeians' first breakthrough came in 450 BC, when the government had the laws of Rome inscribed on 12 tablets and set up in the forum or marketplace. Plebeians had protested that citizens could not know what the laws were because they were not written down. The laws of the 12 tables made it possible for the first time for plebeians to appeal a judgment handed down by patrician judge. In time, the plebeians gained the right to elect their own officials called tribunes. To protect their interests, the tribunes could veto or block those laws that they felt were harmful to plebeians. Little by little, plebeians forced the Senate to choose plebeians as consuls, appointed plebeians to other high offices, and finally to open Senate itself to plebeians. A lasting legacy, subheading. Although the Senate still dominated the government, the common people had gained access to power and won safeguards for their rights without having to restore to war or revolution more than 2,000 years later. The farmers of the United States Constitution, more than 2,000, oh God in heaven, I'm having a hard time today, whatever. The common people had gained access to power and won safeguards for their rights without having to resort to war or revolution. More than 2,000 years later, the farmers of the United States Constitution would adapt the same framers of the United States Constitution would adapt such Roman ideas as the Senate, the veto, and checks on political power. Roman society. The family was a basic unit of Roman society. Under Roman law, the male head of the household, usually the father, had absolute power in the family. He enforced strict discipline and demanded total respect for his authority. His wife was subject to his authority and was not allowed to administer her own affairs. The ideal Roman woman was loving, dutiful, dignified, and strong. Changing role of women, subheading under Roman society. Roman women played a larger role in society than Greek women. In later Roman times, women from all classes ran a variety of businesses, from small shops to major shipyards. Those who made it their fortune earned respect by supporting the arts or paying for public festivals. Most women, though, worked at home, raised their families spinning and weaving. Over the centuries, Roman women gained greater freedom and influence. Patrician women went to public baths, dined out, and attended the theater or the public entertainments with their husbands. Some women, such as Livia and Agrippina the Younger, had highly visible public roles and exercised significant political influence. Subheading: Education under Roman society. Girls and boys alike learned to read and write. Even lower-class Romans were taught to write, as can be seen from the jokes and other graffiti that archaeologists find scrawled on walls around the city. By the late Republic, many wealthy Romans were hiring private tutors, often Greeks, to supervise the education of their children. Under their guidance, the children memorized major events and developments in Roman history. Rhetoric was an important subject for boys who wanted to pursue political careers. Subheading: Religion. This is under Roman society as well. Roman gods and goddesses resembled those of the Etruscans and Greeks. Like the Greek god Zeus, the Roman god Jupiter ruled over the sky and the other gods. Juno, his wife, like the Greek goddess Hera, protected marriage. Sorry, this is a false alarm. Juno, his wife, like the Greek goddess Hera, protected marriage. Romans also prayed to Neptune, god of the sea, whose powers were the same as those of the god Poseidon, the Greek god Poseidon. On the battlefield, they turned to Mars, the god of war. The Roman calendar was full of feasts and other celebrations to honor the gods and to ensure divine favor for the city. As loyal citizens, Romans joined in these festivals, which inspired a sense of community. Throughout Rome were dozens of temples where statues of the gods were housed. Inside these temples, Romans worshipped and asked for divine assistance. Expansion in Italy. As Romans' political and social systems evolved at home, its armies expanded Roman power across Italy. Roman armies conquered first the Etruscans and then the Greek city-states in the south. By about 270 BC, Rome controlled most of the Italian peninsula. Citizen soldiers. Rome's success was due to skillful diplomacy and its loyal, well-trained army. The basic military unit was the legion, made up of about 5,000 men. As in Greece, Roman armies consisted of citizen soldiers who fought without pay and supplied their own weapons. Roman citizens often made good soldiers because they were brought up to value loyalty, courage, and respect of authority. To ensure success, Roman commanders mixed rewards with harsh punishments. Young soldiers who showed courage in action won praise and gifts. If a unit fled from battle, however, 1 of every 10 men from the disgraced unit was put to death. Conquered lands. Rome generally treated its defeated enemies with justice. Conquered people had to acknowledge Roman leadership, pay taxes, and supply soldiers for the Roman army. In return, Rome let them keep their own customs, money, and local government. To a few privileged groups among the conquered people, Rome gave as highly prized right of its full citizenship. Rome gave a highly prized right of full citizenship. Others became partial citizens who were allowed to marry Romans and carry on trade in Rome. As the result of such generous policies, most conquered lands remained loyal to Rome even in troubled times. Protection and unification, final section, subheading of the chapter, of the section rather. To protect its conquests, Rome posted soldiers throughout the land. It also built a network of all-weather military roads to link distant territories to Rome. As trade and travel increased, local peoples incorporated Latin into their languages and adopted many Roman customs and beliefs. Slowly, Italy began to unite under Roman rule. Okay, definitely a lot to touch on there. I'm going to grab a sticky note, and I'm going to write a sticky note on the things that stand out to me. I've been doing some rearranging, so I need to get up to grab a pen. They use the word plebeian about 50 times in one paragraph, so plebeian's probably a good word to write down. But let's start with Rome. Okay. Geography. Let's see. The Romans drive out the Etruscans in 509 BC. They use a republic. with senators that will do a lifetime role as in the Senate. In early republic, the most powerful governing body was the Senate. It's 300 members. So 300 members of the Senate. Landholding elite. I mean, you can kind of imply that. I mean, that's not something necessarily needed to write down. Of course, they're landholding elite. Why wouldn't they be? The thing that's worth writing down is each year the senators elected from the patrician class to consuls. Elected to consuls. Patricians and they served one term. Dictators for war. And held the title for only 6 months. And plebeians, farmers, merchants, artisans, traders who make up the bulk of a population. And that will do it. I have a sticky note here, and that is the extent of what I will hold myself accountable for remembering from that chapter. That section, I keep messing it up. It's starting to kind of irritate me, but that's all right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Remember, context is everything.